Hi there, my name's Henry Bechelet and I'm the Technical Manager for ICL, and I'm here with Glenn Kirby from Syngenta, and we're going to talk to you about leather jacket control using the insecticide Acelepryn. We talked about the emergency authorizations that we'd obtained for Acelepryn earlier on in the year. We had two emergency approvals running, one for chafer grubs, which is now over, and the leather jacket emergency approval, which is still running, and it runs until the end of October. But now is the time when we're getting reports of crane fly activity. So we thought it would be a good idea to pitch back up and just run through, how to get the best out of Acelepryn. Okay, so the emergency approval for leather jacket control runs till the end of October. The rate of application is 0.6 litres per hectare. If you want to apply Acelepryn, you have to fill out a stewardship form, which would then be approved, and that has to be recommended by a basis qualified advisor. I'm sure you're aware of all that, but in terms of sort of how to get the best out of it. The first thing, I suppose, is when to apply. Glenn, we're getting loads of reports of crane flies on the wing, and I'm getting loads of questions, as I'm sure you are. Do we apply now? We can see the crane flies.
Yeah, it's that time. Thanks, Henry. It is that time of year where it's all happening. This happened last year. We saw this little spike going on, and it all kind of fell into the back end of September. And we, and yourself particularly, worked really hard to get this different emergency authorization to give us a bit of a window. So this year we have until the end of October to apply it. And that's really interesting, actually, because if we start looking at the pest tracker data, which is going to pop up on your screen now. There it is.
Yes, come on, let's have a look. So this is information that people have supplied, that the end users are sort of reporting back to you that they're seeing crane flies on the wing, yeah?
Yeah, so Pest Tracker is a kind of community science project that we're doing as an industry. We have lots of people, the whole industry is reporting back when they're seeing crane flies fly and hatch. Now, it's really important to understand this kind of community science point of view, because it is people's reported sightings. There are some downsides to this kind of project, but there are some upsides as well. And what's really interesting is this year, which is the yellow data on here, is very much following the same pattern as we saw last year. We were thinking we might see a difference year to year, but actually it's been remarkably similar on the amount of reports. And if you start looking at this period we're in now, which is the end of September, I don't think my mouse is showing up, but I'm pointing at it, rest assured. We saw last year pretty much exactly the same amount of sightings as we saw this time last year. And you're seeing in this week, we're seeing pretty much exactly the same. Now, we're only halfway through this week, so it's highly likely that will spike. But what then happened last year is we saw this massive peak 2 or 3 weeks later. So it's definitely happening. We are definitely in that cycle. Last year, it wasn't just a case of 1 or 2 days where it hatches. It's a period of hatch. And what we're advising people to do is to wait until that peak is over. So what you want to do is make sure all of those eggs are laid in your surfaces so that you are catching it as close to the maximum amount of juvenile leather jackets in the turf as possible. So we've got to be a little bit patient, but each area around the country is going to be slightly different. So we're now in that period. If you think you're through that period of big hatch, then now is the time to go. If you don't think about the big one, delay.
Yeah, so these kind of reports of seeing the first signs of crane flies is okay. We're on a state of readiness, but we need to sort of just hold on and sort of try and get through this period where we kind of think, no, that was it. Now we've sort of got there. It might be useful at this stage just to sort of remind us about, why we're sort of waiting for these sort of timings and how the product itself works, because there's a delay period, isn't it? When we're waiting for eggs to be laid, and then the larvae to hatch, and we're looking to coincide the placement of the Acelepryn at the time when the eggs hatch, or after when the eggs hatch, aren't we? And there's this kind of period that the product takes just to move down into the grub zone. So we're trying to sort of coincide those two things, aren't we?
Yeah, there's two things going on. So if we look at it purely from the product point of view, the product is designed to bind to organic matter. So as it moves into that kind of grub zone, the area that the insect is feeding, it takes a while to work its way down through there. So there is a kind of period of 2 or 3 weeks before it's in the right area for those grubs to be feeding. So we know it takes a little while to get it in there and get it in the right place. But the flip side of that is we want to be targeting the juvenile insects. The younger the insect is, the more susceptible it is to the product. So we're trying to match those two things to time up so that egg hatch and the product are being maximized in the right area, meet at the same time. We talk a lot about the timing of this and trying to get it right when the peak hatches. It's probably not as key as we've made out. But what we don't want people doing is applying a month, 2 months in advance. We want to make sure that hatch has actually happened, and this isn't just all going to calm down now and then we see the main hatch happen in a month's time, because then we would have gone early. And if you look at last year's spike, you can see that we saw the beginning of it. Some people might have gone then, but just be patient and make sure that you're confident you are through the bulk of that hatch.
Yeah, so we would expect the sort of application timing to be in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, obviously it depends on where you are, but if you're sort of at the first signs of seeing crane fly activity, there's, it's just hang on a little bit possibly, and then it's better that you sort of wait a week or two maybe than if you go a week or two too soon.
Yeah, from what we've seen at the moment, you're better to go a week later than a week earlier.
Yeah,
it's not that critical, but that just gives you the opportunity to see, are you really in the peak of it? And you'll never really know. You talk to people, and some of the best ways of seeing them are under lights on machines in the dark. They're attracted to light, so they'll be driving around on the golf course in the morning and they'll feel this massive flush of them in their face, but during the day they'll see very little of them. So you just got to be really observant and start looking for those things. But we want to get through this peak. And this time last year, we saw a very similar pattern. A lot of people thought it was the peak, but the peak came right at the end of the month. And I suspect we're in a similar pattern, but there's no knowing. And that will be slightly variable around the country. I'm getting reports that down in the southeast, where it's been really dry this year, exceptionally different to the rest of the country, they haven't seen any activity down there yet. So that may be a little bit longer. And that's why this October, end of October emergency authorization was so critical to getting more out of this product.
Yeah. So are you going to be, I mean, you've got your blog, haven't you? We're sort of continuing to encourage people to report into the pest tracker, and then you're going to sort of maybe report back to everyone about sort of where the sort of peaks of activity are in the next couple of weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. We'll keep trying to feed back to people what's going on. Please keep logging in Pest Tracker. It's been really, really useful. And you can see how I would imagine exactly the same people have committed this year as they did last year, because the numbers are frighteningly similar. Yeah. If you've seen them once, please don't feel you can't report them again. We're really trying to log how long this pattern, how long this hatch goes on for. So if you logged them last week, but you're seeing more this week, log them again. Please just keep logging all the time you're seeing. That will give us a better indication and a better understanding for next year how to keep getting more out of it. So yeah, keep logging it, but we are really in that window now. So you are pretty close. Get everything ready, get your product in the ChemSafe, get your sprayer calibrated, do all of those things you need to do to be ready to go and look for that optimum day in the next couple of weeks to get out there.
Okay, so we're sort of pretty clear on the timing that we're sort of getting there. Okay, so it's how to apply it or how to get the best out of it that we sort of really want to know. So we get the timing right, but there's still lots of things to think about in terms of the actual sort of mechanics of the application itself. And the first thing, and the sort of most obvious thing, is you're going to run through it, but the water rate's crucial, isn't it?
It is.
Because we want the active ingredient to sort of be moved down into the sort of grub zone, there's actually quite a lot of things that you need to do to make sure that happens. So you've got your 7-point plan. Do you want to just quickly run through this?
Yeah, so we've talked about the preventative application. This isn't something you want to wait until the spring and when you've got a leather jacket issue to apply. As they get older, you'll get less effects out of it. So the earlier we go, the more of that population we're going to wipe out early. And we spoke quite a lot there about this kind of peak numbers of species being observed, and I suspect we'll see a secondary peak, so just be patient and wait for that.
Okay.
Mow prior to applications, a really good bit of best practice advice anyway. When we spoke about how this product binds to organic matter, it's exactly the same with when you're spraying it. If it dries out on that leaf, it will bind to that leaf. So we're trying to maximize its longevity and the period that it's about for. So cut beforehand, because that gives you a little bit of room for maneuver afterwards.
Okay.
When you're spraying, 0.6 litres a hectare is the application rate, and minimum of 600 litres of water. We did a survey a couple of years back just looking at how people had applied this, and only about 50% of people had actually applied it over the 600 litres. The rest of them had kind of stuck to their basic spraying pattern of 400.
Yeah.
So take the time to set your sprayer up properly. As much water as you can get out, but don't do that by upping the pressure. Do that by slowing down your forward speed or increasing your nozzle size, because we don't want to lose any of this to drift either. So air induction
that's
nozzles.
the water rate where the droplets roll off the leaf, isn't it? And that's what we want to happen. We don't want it sticking to the leaf. So yeah, just get that water rate right. It's vitally important.
Yep. So the aim is to get it to run off that leaf down into the grub zone. Now, at this period, when you've got these really young leather jackets, they are not going to be feeding on leaf material. They're going to be feeding in 6 litres a hectare is the application rate. So that's the objective, is to get that material down in there. And it doesn't matter how good a job you do of spraying this, there is still going to be some residue left on those leaves. So we want to be rinsing off that residue as quickly as possible off that leaf. You don't really want it to dry on there. You want to be getting it off that leaf, because any product stuck to that leaf is not going to be very useful at this period in the year for these juvenile leather jackets. So rinse it off as soon as you can into that right area and let it work its way down through the organic matter.
Okay. So we need to be quite attentive about even the application stage, don't we, to get the best out of it. We always get asked the question, Glenn. I'll ask it you again. What about surfactants? What about wetting agents? Do we need to apply them to sort of help them move through the soil? What's the take on that?
Yeah, so we have done some work on it. We're continuing to do more. We have seen no benefits to adding a wetting agent, but equally we see no downside. Now, there are benefits to having a well-hydrated soil root zone that's not hydrophobic, that's taking water well. All of those things are positives. So if you're in a wetting agent program that's making all of those things happen, there's no real value to adding a wetting agent to the product. If you're in a soil that is hydrophobic, then I would suggest you probably try and get that under control before you try and get this in there. So I would probably get yourself on a wetting agent program or do something to start dealing with that before you apply the Acelepryn. So there's no downside to adding it as a product, but we haven't seen any improved efficacy out of the product to date in our trial work. But we're looking at all sorts of adjuvants, trying to get more out of it, and we'll report back. But at the moment, no added benefit if you're in a really good wetting agent program as it is.
Yeah, it's just sort of avoid that kind of obstructive kind of impact that a hydrophobic or maybe an overly thatchy soil might have in terms of sort of, helping that product move down through the soil profile. But That's good, straightforward, nice and clear.
And the last point we've got on here is a useful one, actually. Returning clippings is probably more valuable in this product than we realised. We're back to that same point. It binds to organic matter, so it doesn't matter how good a job you do of spraying, doesn't matter how good a job you do of irrigating that in afterwards, there is going to be an element of it that is still on the leaf. If we can return that to the soil, we start really maximising how much of this material we're recycling into the right area. Now, it goes against the grain a little bit, and it's a little bit uncomfortable returning clippings on greens, but it's something that we feel will add some benefit. And where we do return clippings in fairways, these areas with higher levels of organic matter for the product to bind to, the longevity we've seen out of Acelepryn going through the spring is phenomenal. So there is real value in it binding to these organic matter. And we've got to learn and understand from that when we're using it in greens, which is a different kind of construction where we're working really hard to reduce organic matter and we're removing clippings. They're important parts of the puzzle that will help us get a bit more of it. We're doing more trial work this winter to understand exactly how much more it will get us, but return clippings if you possibly can.
Yeah, there is some interesting work going on, isn't there? Okay, so let's just sort of let's draw this together. We're sort of at the point sort of now and in the next few weeks where we're sort of looking to monitor for the peak flight of the crane flies and then apply once we feel like we've just gone through that. When we do apply, it's kind of really important that we do everything that we can to make sure that the active ingredient moves down through the soil profile. So pre-application preparation and water rates and maybe irrigation, and then sort of post-treatment things like returning the clippings you just mentioned are really important. But the key is we're trying to get the active ingredient down into the grub zone at the point that those sort of young grubs start feeding. That's when we're going to sort of achieve our control, and we're getting there now. But with all these things, it's kind of like it's just to make sure that we get everything right. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Glenn, any last thing to add?
There's a lot of variables out there. There's a lot of different hatch patterns going on. There's lots of different soil profiles. It's proven to work really well in lots of situations. Be realistic about what you're expecting here. 90% control at this time of year is really, really good control, but we have a whole winter here. And there's 2 species of leather jackets that are hatching at the moment. One of them will only be 6 months again before it's hatching in the spring. To be realistic about the expectations with this product, it's part of a management program, and I suspect we're going to be relying on other things as well to really get on top of this as a challenge. But everything we're looking at the moment is how we get the very best out of this product so we reduce the other tools that we need to use in this program.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for that. That's been really helpful. And we'll catch up with you next time. See you then.